micro level of what is going on in the home, what is going on in the marriage. Really talk about specific details, not just with a broad brush, but really understand. We're actually, within our series, Family Matters, and we picked Family Matters because it's Family Matters, but family matters. And so within that series, we're going to talk about the atmosphere of the home. So we're really going to deduce it even further when we're talking about the atmosphere, how to create a good atmosphere in the home. We're going to talk about emotions. We're going to talk about conflict. We're going to talk about response. We're going to talk about a lot of these things to understand that the atmosphere in the home can be created, and to also know that who our children will be and who the people in the home will be is not what they hear, but what they see. What they see is what they will become. You may tell them this is what a godly family is supposed to be, but who they will become, the families that they will create, is what they see on an everyday basis. So you may say, look, this is how you handle conflict. Well, they are going to handle conflict by what they see in the home every single day. So we're going to talk about some of those things. We're going to talk about our responsibilities. We're going to talk about the responsibilities that all of us have. So we'll talk about the home. We're going to also talk about our church home, how we're supposed to interact with each other. And so today, I just kind of want to give a brief introduction. I want to give an introduction of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then kind of set the stage. Of course, this is our home. This is going to be our home for probably the next 5, 6, 7 weeks. Will kind of depend on how things go, but this is something that we all have, the home, and it's supposed to be a safe place. It's supposed to be a place of love, the atmosphere of gentleness, compassion, kindness, and a lot of times, we have that in our mind, but it's not really reality. And so the goal is, how do we continue to create that? And I say continue because I want you to know that we're not doing this series because I look out and I see just a bunch of bad families. On the contrary, I do not. I see a bunch of great families that are doing a great job in the home. But the reason I'm wanting to do this and really feel God calling us to do this is because I see what we're against. I see our society. I see the enemy. I see all these forces in so many areas, just an onslaught against the family. And so we're really going to take a look at a lot of these different areas. That's not just the norm. I'm not going to just go into husbands, do this, women submit. We're not going to, some of these things. I want to go to another level. And so hopefully God would be blessed in us really going through some of these things in a different level. So what is a family? I actually looked and thought and really couldn't really find anything that I liked, to be honest with you. And so I kind of grafted this from a few different things. What is a family? A God-ordained unit related by marriage, blood, or adoption. God created the family to satisfy the deepest longing of our hearts and to give us a means to give and receive love, and to provide a safe and secure environment in which to nurture and to teach and to love our children. That's family. And we do this through God's love. We do this through understanding who He is and what He has given to us. One of the greatest blessings that we can receive in this life is the love of a family. And again, if we say, look, how's your family doing? Our natural instinct is to say, everything's great. But what I really want us to do is to really, really look deep, deep, deep into the heart of the family and then ask ourselves, how can it be better? The statistics right now is 60% of marriages end in divorce. It's not 50 anymore, it's 60. And a lot of times we're satisfied to say, hey, look, that's not going to be me. Maybe I've gone through a rough marriage before. You got a divorce, you got your second, maybe you're in your third, and you're like, hey, look, this is it. I'm not going to be a part of the 60%. I'm here to tell you this. That's not the goal. The goal is not to stay married. The goal is not to say I'm going to be a part of the 40%. They say 60% end in divorce. And if you go, it's, I think, about 86% or 15% actually have a great marriage. So the goal is not just to have a okay marriage or just to kind of stay together. The goal is to have an absolutely great marriage. And it can happen. You can have a great marriage. If I ask you if you want a great marriage, most of y'all would say yes. And if I say, well, how does that happen? Well, you will kind of just throw out the normal answers. And again, I don't want to talk about the normal things. I want to talk about more distinct things. So that is the goal, because when we're talking about a family, you cannot have a great family if you don't know how to have a great relationship between a husband and wife. So we're going to hit that hard as well. The bonds that exist between the members of our family are very sacred. And I had the privilege of being in a great family. I had a privilege, let me back that up, because again, you just throw it out there. I had a privilege of being involved in a okay family. And through the years, as God began to take control of our family's lives, it became better and better and better and better. And the reason why it became better is because I had a mom and a dad that were not satisfied with the status quo of a family. They wanted to make sure that they were really looking at them. My dad, even to this day, the last time my parents were here was about a month ago. And my dad, which will probably be watching this video, but my dad is still trying to be a better father. He's still trying to be a better father. And he came up to me the last time he was here and he said, I just want to let you know, I'm proud of you and your brother and your sister and the way you turned out. And I know that I wasn't the greatest dad, and I just want to let you know I'm trying. I'm trying. I'm looking at some areas in my life. And, we had a great moment because I said, Dad, you were great. And I love you and Mom, and we have a great family, and our family's doing well. But what touched me more is, at the age of 70, he is not satisfied with who he is as a father, and he is not satisfied with who he is as a husband. Because we also had conversations about, just being a husband and some of the things that he has learned. And so it just blessed my heart to know that at age 70, he was not through improving being a husband and being a father. And now, as a grandfather, he wants to give everything to his grandchildren. He wants to be a great grandfather. And again, so when we start this series, I don't want you to say, well, I'm good. I'm okay. Let's go for greatness. Let's go for, okay, God, because I believe God wants us to. I believe God wants us to continue to grow in all areas of our lives. And I believe God is calling us as a church to kind of look at ourselves as a family, because we just spent, the last 3 months looking at us as individuals at the church. We talked about surrender and ownership, and we talked about submitting and resisting. We talked about, not conforming, but renewing. And the goal now is to begin to renew our minds within our families, because who we are as the church is who we are separately as individual families. And then who we are as individual families come back to who we are as a church. And so it is a natural progression now to really begin to look at who we are and how we invest in people. Because you may say, well, my family's, I've kind of been there and done that. The goal is that we understand the importance of investing and pouring ourselves out. And so we do that within our family, but we also do that within our church family. And then we want to be that type of person, wherever we go. Because when you are that type of person, it brings harmony to who you are. And if it brings harmony to who you are, it brings harmony into the home. So that is a big one, is just to have harmony within the home, because, today it's really lacking. So I was a part of a great family. It's no accident, though, that the Bible is filled with passages that explain our relationship to God by comparing it to the relationship with His Father. That's how He compares the family. Let me read that one more time. It's not an accident that the Bible is filled with passages that explain our relationship to God by comparing it to our relationship with our Father. Our earthly families are intended to reflect God's unconditional love. Listen to this. Husbands are called to love their wives as Christ loves His church. And wives are called to devote themselves to their husbands as the church devotes itself to Christ. We have the picture of the home given to us by God. And by the way, we are going to take a look at that passage later on down the line, where husbands are supposed to love the way Christ loved the church. Because I had a moment with that passage, and it really turned my marriage upside down. Emulating the love that exists between God and His church and His family is not very easy at all. You may have a picture in your mind of what a perfect family looks like. And so I've got some pictures that you may have seen throughout the years. Let's take a look at that next slide. Here's some families that maybe you have seen throughout the years. Who didn't love the Huxtables? Who didn't love Family Ties and Uncle Jesse? A lot of times we learn about the family by what we watch on TV. And you think, watching the Huxtables, I thought, man, such a great family. Man, I love their sweaters. Now I look back and think, what was I thinking? Because I bought a lot of those Huxtable sweaters. And, but everything was just so perfect. And everything was just, and as a youngster, I thought, man, that's a great family. And at that time, it really wasn't that for me. We were kind of figuring things out as a family. We were figuring things out as a faith family, because my dad and my mom, they were not raised in the church. They were raised in a different church. And my dad wasn't saved until I was about 11 or 12 years old. And so we were just kind of learning how to take the biblical principles and make them real in our home. So you learn a lot from, of course, the Waltons. That was Pam's favorite show. Now there's another picture, because that's not how it works. And here's some other pictures that we may see. A little different. Al Bundy, yeah. Now, there you go. He was the man in the 80s. But at the same time, a little different. And so we see the picture of the family from many different scopes. And a lot of times we learn what these families are, and we emulate what we see. But that's not always the case. The first family ever instituted was, of course, Adam and Eve. The first family established was also, unfortunately, the first dysfunctional family. And they've all been dysfunctional ever since. Isn't it funny that the first family that was created had major issues? They had major issues. They were dysfunctional. And the interesting thing about the first family was they lived in an environment that was with God. God created this perfect place, the Garden of Eden, and there was no sin. Everything was great. He was rolling around in there, walking to and fro and talking. And yet, that first family had major issues. Why? Because of an individual by the name of Satan. The first murder was from the first family. Why? Because there was an onslaught from the enemy that destroyed that family and has been destroying families ever since. And so when we look at those pictures of the Huxtables and we look at all these different things and we just kind of take our eye off the prize, because the prize is the family and allowing God to do something special within your home. But if you kind of keep your eye on other things, As a leader, I have been taught to keep my eyes on different things. Not just one thing, but you keep your eye on different things within the church, within other businesses and organizations that I've been a part of. I learned that. But I also learned very early in life to make sure to keep my eye on my family and to have specific plans. And as I've talked before, we have financial plans, we may have education plans, we have all these different plans for our family. And we think about the future, and we think about all these different things. We think about the movies we want to go watch. We think about, what we're going to do this Christmas, where we're going to go. But one of the major questions that we have to ask ourselves is, what is our plan for spiritual development? What's your plan for spiritual development? If you have children, what is your plan for spiritual development for your kids? Do you know and do you understand? Do we understand? Again, it's not just what we teach, but what they see in us. They will become a pattern, a reflection of what they see, not necessarily of what you teach. I know that personally. Many, many times, and over and over again, I would try to teach Joseph different things and teach him this and teach him that. And the interesting thing is, as I've shared before, it wasn't until years down the line that he would learn something that I started saying, hey, look, we talked about that like 3 years ago. We talked about that 4 years ago. And then I just realized, number one, why am I even going there and say, hey, I tried to teach you. That just made me look bad. But then I realized that, it wasn't the right timing for him. What he was really learning is not what he was hearing. It's what he was seeing. And so we really, really, really need to understand that point. Understand that there's an enemy, and he's not going to allow you just to not keep your eye on your family and just kind of know, well, it's just going to evolve into something good. If you don't give your family direction, the world will direct it. And the thing of it is we don't really even understand it. We just kind of let it happen because, we come to church on Sundays. We kind of do our thing on Wednesdays at times. And maybe they go to a Christian school. Maybe they're homeschooled. But if we really don't hone in and we're not careful, the world conforms us. That's why I really wanted to look at Romans 12, 1, 2, and 3 for us to understand that if we don't allow God to direct us and we don't have a plan and a purpose for our life, the world will take us into its current and take us into a place that we never thought we'd be. And so we're constantly fighting being conformed to this world. We're constantly fighting our family being conformed to this world. And most of the time we don't know it unless we're really trying to move away from being conformed, but renewing our mind daily and not living off of our savings account. And what I mean by that is some of the principles and the scriptures that you've learned throughout the years, and now maybe you're at a state where you're like, I know everything that I need to know. I'm not really, I'm good. I know. I've been in church all my life. And so what happens is we kind of get, what's the word I'm looking for? Complacent in what we have learned throughout the years, and we're not continuing to grow in our intimacy with the Lord. We're not continuing to learn, because when you're learning, He's guiding. If you stop learning and if you stop chasing after the presence of the Lord, He doesn't guide anymore, because then we're conformed, and then the world through us being conformed begins to guide and give direction. And again, it's not that we have bad intentions or we don't want to do it. It just begins to happen. And then there's an environment created in our homes. I heard a statistic that because of the video games and the TV shows, and by the way, the last thing I'm going to do during this series is hammer home, you got to stop watching all these things. It's not about the what's, it's about the whys. So I'm not going to hammer these things home, because in the 70s and 80s, they kind of hammered, you got to do this, you got to take away this, you got to do, and it didn't do anything but brought resentment. What I want to do is talk about the whys during this series, and then allow God to direct you. But as we've talked about surrendering our lives, when he does begin to give direction and guidance and say, look, I want you to add this, I want you to take away from that, because we're learning to surrender, because we're learning to submit, because we're trying not to conform, we want God to renew our minds, we allow him to begin to teach us. But going back to that statistic, and again, it's something that we don't even realize until I heard it, and I thought, that's right. They said by the time our children get to 18, because of all the video games and all the movies, they've seen thousands of murders. Thousands of murders. And you think, well, is that a big deal? Is it? Is it? Because if we're not careful, we'll just say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. They're going to be okay. Well, again, it wasn't until years later, but I didn't want my son just to be okay. I wanted to establish within him a firm foundation of understanding biblically of who he is, who God is, and to help him develop his own personal relationship, intimate relationship with the Lord as best as I could. And the best way that I found that I could was by demonstrating to him. The best way I could demonstrate what marriage is was by demonstrating to him. The best way I could teach him what the role of a husband and the father is to demonstrate that by the way I loved his mom, by the way we discussed issues and topics, because I always knew I had a son always watching me. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't always the case. And I need to be reminded of that over and over and over again. So maybe this is nothing more than just a reminder to understand that we are under attack. The Christian home is under attack. And I probably don't need to remind you what probably our students are learning in the school systems. What our nation feels about the Christian home. How it's being redeveloped and re-understood. And so there's a constant attack in many different ways and many different forces. And it's important for us to know that. And again, I don't want to scare you, but I do want to sound the alarm. I want to sound the alarm knowing that the enemy is coming full force. And if we just kind of take it as it's not a big deal, as long as they're getting some grounding, maybe the foundation is not as strong as we think it is. And that's why most kids that grow up in church, once they get to the age of 18, 19, 20, they leave the church. They leave the church. And so we need to create a good, strong foundation. We are at war, and the battle continues to rage. So what do? We need to fight for our families. We need to fight for our families. We need to understand what's going on, the war. We must allow God to renew our minds daily for the benefit of the family that he has given to us. We must allow him to tear down, going back to what we've been talking about. You see how everything kind of comes? We need to allow him to tear down and rebuild the foundation now of our families. We've been talking about this as individuals. We've been talking about this as the church. Now we need to go back to our families and relook at who we are, where we're going, and what we want to accomplish within the home. I want to read to you a passage in Nehemiah chapter 4. If you can actually skip to Nehemiah 4, 6 through 20 for time purposes. Nehemiah 4, 6 through 20. And again, this passage as I'm about to read is just to create an environment of what we want to do and where we want to go. This particular time, Nehemiah is rebuilding the walls. The wall of Jerusalem was destroyed, and he felt God calling him to rebuild it. And during the time of rebuilding, it was a great undertaking. And there was a lot of enemies, a lot of people that did not want him to rebuild the walls. So they were under attack constantly during this time. And so let me read to you Nehemiah 4, 6 through 20. At last, the wall was completed to half its height around the entire city, for the people had worked with enthusiasm. But Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and Ammonites and Ashdodites heard that all the work was going ahead and the gaps of the walls of Jerusalem were being repaired, and they were furious. They all made plans to come and fight against Jerusalem and to throw us into confusion. But we prayed to our God and guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. Then the people of Judah began to complain. The workers are getting tired, and there's so much rubble to be moved. We will never be able to build the wall by ourselves. Meanwhile, our enemies were saying, before they know what's happening, we will swoop down on them and kill them and end their work. The Jews who lived near the enemy came and told us again and again, they will come from all directions and attack us. So I placed an armed guard behind the lowest part of the wall in the exposed area. I stationed the people to stand guard by families, armed with swords, spears, and bows. Then as I looked over the situation, I called together the nobles and the rest of the people and said to them, don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord, who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers. Fight for your sons. Fight for your daughters. Fight for your wives. And fight for your homes. When our enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, we all returned to our work on the wall. But from then on, only half of the men worked, while the others stood guard with spears, shield, bows, and coats and mail. I'm here to tell you that the church needs to rebuild the family. They need to rebuild the home. We cannot do it on our own because our minds are skewed. We have conformed. We live in a world that we will conform. We have to renew our minds daily. We need God's guidance. We need God's direction. We need His power. We need His help to do the things that He's calling us to do. And I believe with all my heart that God is calling us to renew our commitment to our families, renew our commitment in our homes, to renew our commitment to our sons and daughters and our grandchildren, renew our commitment to our husbands, renew our commitments to our wives, renew our commitment as a family of God together, understanding and knowing that we are on an onslaught, an attack. And the enemy will not rest. The years are waxing thin. And he's coming with everything that he has. But it is not a time to be afraid or to back up. It's a time to grab our spears. It's a time to work together. You know, they said, to raise a child, you need a village. No, to raise a child, you need a family. To raise a child, you need God's church family together. And I'm here to tell you that I want to be a part of your family. They all worked hard to guard and protect each other, not just themselves, each other. I'm here to tell you that I'm here to guard and to protect and to help and to be anything that I can for your family. And I also need that from you. And we all need that from each other. We've got kids, we've got young kids, we've got teenagers, we got couples, we got young couples, we got older couples. We all need to help each other. We all need to be a part of God's family. So if there's a need, we all meet the need. If we have a young boy in our midst, don't just brush them off, but utilize your time and invest in them so that our families within our church knows that when they come to church, they're being invested in not just by dad and mom, but by church members here at our church. This is our home. This is God's place. And so, Kevin, when your girls are here, I want you to know that if they're around me, that I'm going to watch them, I'm going to protect them, that I'm going to bring security for them, and I'm going to love them. And if they're in need and I'm around, I'm going to be there. Amen. And Kevin, I pray and hope that you know that from everybody at this church. Why? Because it's that important. Same thing with you, Mike, with Blaze. I want you to know that I love him, and I love his heart, and I love his spirit, and you're not the only one that's going to be investing in him. We all need to come together. There's some young couples here that are just learning and understanding what marriage is. They're just understanding the home and the family. And to know it's not just a portrait, it's not a TV show. And to know that, as you get started, because you claim the name Christian, you have a bullseye on your back, and the enemy wants to make you a statistic. He wants to undercut you before you even get going. And what I'm saying is it's time to double down on what we know and what we believe to be true. And really allow God to scrub our minds and move away from being conformed and resist the devil and surrender to him, submit to God, and ask ourselves, God, how can I be a better father? How can I be a better grandmother? How can I be a better wife? How can we create an atmosphere in the home that you would so want? Because when you create that atmosphere, it brings harmony. And so when you go to the home and you're in the world and all these things are going on and you're working hard and you're tired and you come home and you know when you walk in these doors there's harmony in the home. And that's not always the case. But that's what we want to learn. We want to grow together. It's not me just teaching. It's us learning together. I'm excited because I'm not satisfied with the husband that I am. I know there's a lot of things that I need to work on to be a better husband. There are some things that I need to work on to be a better father. Why? Because my son is not 10 anymore, and he's not 15. Now he's 23, and I need to be a great father for a 23-year-old, knowing that he's newly married, going on 2 years. He's now a pastor, and so I need to continue to refresh and not only that, but pray for him. God convicted me just 2 days ago. He came down and spent 2 days with us, and I'm like, God, I'm not praying for him enough. I'm not praying for him enough. And from that, God has really been hitting me hard just for prayer in general. I'm not praying for, the Mays. You've been married how long now? 6 months. You know what? They need prayer. They need prayer. And then those that have been married for longer, who've been married for 20, 26 years. I've been married going on 26 years. I need prayer because I don't want to just, marriage is what it is. Sometimes when you've been married a long time, it's there. It exists. And you're not working on it anymore. Well, I'm here to say that we need to work on it anymore. We start by looking at ourselves. We start by prayer. And maybe you're not in a good relationship. It's time to begin to pray and to know that you have your church family that's praying for you. If your house has damaged foundation, it doesn't matter how much you spackle, how much spackle you use, cracks will continue to reappear. And so it's not about just kind of glossing over. It's really taking a look at our foundation. And again, that's what we're wanting to do. That's why we talked about, tearing down and rebuilding and things like that. Because, with our church, we want to, that's why we're in Acts. We wanted to really take a look at the church and find out, who we are. What are some of the things that we need to relook at, so we can have a strong foundation within our church, and the same thing with our families. As a Christian family begins and ends with each member's personal commitment to God. And see, that's hugely important, because when it's all said and done, we are Christians. We are disciples, and we need to continue to grow in our commitment to Him. And as we grow in our commitment to Him, the family comes together. And that's what we plan on doing. It's continuing to grow together. To get to where you want to be, you need to know where you want to go. So where do you want to go? Where do you want to go as a family? Been married 15 years. Great. Where do you want to go now? You've been married 25 years. You've been married 50 years. Great. Where do you want to go now? Where does God want to take you? I'm here to tell you that you've been married 50 years. That God wants to continue your journey. There's some things that maybe you've been holding on to, and He just wants, very loving you, to let it go. again, so he can put something back in your hands. Some godly things, some godly principles that we can, you're older, the legacy that you're leaving. Maybe the most important time in your life is the legacy that you want to leave, to pass on. What do you want to pass on? And again, the best thing that you can do is not tell, but show. Show those things that you want to pass on. And we're going to hit on all these subjects. So again, do you know where you want your family to go? No matter where you are now, whether you're single, dreaming of a family, or a seasoned veteran of matrimony, keep your eyes turned to God's love. And ask Him, God, I've been at this for a long time. Renew my mind. Renew my commitment. Renew my commitment to my husband, to my wife, to my family. Once you've aligned yourself with God's plan for you, the rest will always fall into place. So that's our goal for the next 6 weeks. Our goal is to just really zone in on particular areas. We're going to look at the role of husband and wife. We're going to look at the role of atmosphere. We're going to look at the role of harmony. We're going to look at the role of emotion. We're going to look at the role of conflict, all with the understanding of people are always watching. Good? I hope you enjoyed it. It is not going to be one where it's tongue lashings and none of that. I don't want to preach to you. I want us to learn together. I want us to learn together how we can go from a good family to a great family. How we can go from a good marriage to a great marriage. How we can go from a good commitment to the Lord as a family to a great commitment to the Lord. For us to understand that we are in the fight of our lives. And that you're not alone. That we're all in this together. And that we are one big